Dr. Shabir, let's talk about Jacob. We've talked about, when we talk about Jacob, we often talk about Joseph, called Yusuf, and I feel like his story gets a little bit overshadowed by the beauty and brilliance of Joseph. But there's a lot that we can also say about Jacob.
Yes.
How is Jacob depicted in the Bible and the Quran? What are the similarities?
Well, the similarities are, first of all, to begin with, he's called by both names, Jacob and Israel. In the Bible, it is said that God renamed him as Israel, and then, of course, he becomes the father of the Israelite nation. He has 12 sons, and they are the forefathers of the patriarchs of the 12 Israelite tribes. So there are a lot of similarities between the two. In the Quran, he is depicted as a prophet of God, one who receives divine revelation, so that in the Quran it says, وَإِنَّهُ لَذُو عِلْمٍ لِمَا عَلَّمْنَاهُ. He's certainly a possessor of knowledge for the fact that God has actually taught him. So that makes him, in Muslim understanding, a prophet of God.
What are the differences in the way that Jacob is depicted in the Quran and the Bible?
In the Quran, he is depicted as a righteous person, as prophets are generally shown to be in the Quran, and so he is a model, among other such models, for human beings to emulate and to reproduce in our own lives. In the Bible, he is depicted often as a sort of a trickster. He tricks his brother Esau out of his birthright. So Esau was hungry and needing a bowl of soup, and Jacob says, okay, I'll give you the bowl of soup, but you have to sell me your birthright for the bowl of soup. And Esau then reneges on his birthright, and Jacob then becomes the preeminent son as a result of this. Now, of course, from the point of view of the biblical authors, it's Esau who doesn't look good in their eyes, because how dare he sells his birthright
for food, right?
For the food. But from our point of view, if the guy is starving, and and as he said himself, what good is it for me to be the preeminent son if I'm going to lose my life here? So give me the soup. And
there's also the other story where he tricks his father too, right? Because Esau goes out to get food so that his father will bless him, and then Jacob brings the food earlier, and Isaac thinks that he is Esau, so he blesses Jacob the way he would have blessed Esau.
Yes.
And it turns out that it's the wrong son.
Yes. Of course, the way in which it is depicted in the Bible, it's the story may be difficult for skeptics to agree with, because it says that Esau was born hairy. Almost like he's got like a coat of fur over him, which is an obvious exaggeration because no human being has that much hair. When Isaac was old and having lost his sight, he's now ready to give his blessing to his son. So it's going to be either Esau or Jacob, and Esau is the firstborn son, so naturally he's going to go to the firstborn son. But Rebecca then suggests to Jacob, come, I'll put this coating of fur over you, animal skin, and so when you go to your father and he touches your neck and your hand, he will be convinced that you're Esau and then give you the blessing. And so he complied at the behest of his mother, and the father mistakenly gives the blessing now to Jacob instead of Esau. And it so happens that the blessing is something that cannot be revoked, apparently. Once it is given, even by mistake, it's gone.
And it seems like it can only be given to one son.
It can only be given to the one son, that particular blessing that goes to him. And so when Esau comes back from the hunting and he realizes, and in fact, he actually went out to serve his father. He went out to hunt for the meat that his father would love to eat. eat, to cook the stew that his father would love. But Rebekah forestalled him by, or preempted him by cooking the stew that the father loves and giving it to Jacob to go bring it to the father. So the father was fooled. But once he had given out the blessing, and Esau has now come back and said, Father, but where's the blessing? Here I am, your son Esau. The father now says, sorry, son, I've already given out the blessing to your brother, and now it cannot be taken back, which seems a little bit strange, because if the, uttering the word of blessing does not really, it's not like the words are so magical that they're going to bring about whatever is uttered by the human being. Obviously, this depends on God bringing about to fruition whatever was uttered. So if Isaac uttered these blessings by mistake, directing it at Jacob, thinking that this was Esau, you would think that God would know that this was intended for Esau, and Esau would still get the rewards of these blessings. But no, it was not to be so. But all of these give the impression to historians that what is happening here is that the story is being written in retrospect. The story is written by the descendants of Jacob, who want to champion their ancestor vis-a-vis his brother.
But I mean, at the same time, they don't depict Jacob in, the best of lights, right? Because I can imagine if someone saw someone as their hero or their champion, they would show him in the best light. But for a Muslim looking at that, it seems like he's not perceived in the best of ways.
Yeah. So the question then is, why would they depict their ancestor in this way, as cunning and so on? But maybe that's part of the thinking of the writers at that time. Like if he's cunning and if he can trick the other one,
means maybe he's smart.
Yeah. So ideas of what's right and wrong change over time, and with different individuals at different times. And sometimes the writers did not quite see all the aspects of this, or how the story might be interpreted in the modern time. And so they depicted it that way.
I really like the way that Jacob is depicted in the Quran in terms of the patience that he had and the trust that he had in God. So can you talk about that little, about how, I don't know if the Bible has the same sort of story, but tell me about how Jacob is described in the Quran.
Yeah, we will have more of an opportunity to reflect on this when we deal with the story of Joseph. But for the limited time that we have, I want to just say that yes, the Quran shows that he had sabrun jamil, beautiful patience, and we will elaborate on that. Another aspect of the Quranic depiction is that Jacob was concerned with monotheism and with teaching his children monotheism, to the extent that the Quran says, Am kuntum shuhada idh hadara Yaqub al-maut. Were you there when death came to Jacob? When he gathered his children and he asked them, who are you going to worship after me? And they pledged they're going to worship only the one true God. This too is slightly different from the biblical depiction, in which he calls his sons together and he starts charting out the world and who is going to rule what portion. So there seems to be a worldly perspective in the one narrative and a very otherworldly perspective in the other one. So these are subtle differences, but on the whole, both books recognize him to be a great person, one of the great ancestors of our faith, and we respect him all the more for that.
Thank you for sharing your thoughts on Jacob, Dr. Shabir Ali.
You're welcome.